Most people treat podcast promotion like it's a separate job. They finish recording and then they're staring at a blank screen going, okay, now what? Do I post a clip, write a caption, send an email? It starts to feel like the promotion takes more energy than the actual episode. The problem usually isn't effort, it's the lack of a process or a system. That's why this video is sponsored by Riverside, because Riverside is the closest thing that I found to an all-in-one promotion engine for podcasters, especially if you're a beginner. Recording, editing, short-form clips, long-form segments, it's all in one place. Once you build the machine, you look like you've got an entire team behind you, even if you're running this completely solo. It's honestly the tool I wish I had when I started back in 2016. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 strategies for promoting your podcast using Riverside. You don't have to implement all 5 at once. Just pick the ones that make the most sense for where you're at right now. Layer them in over time, and you'll start to feel less scattered and more like you actually have a flywheel. The first strategy and the most popular one, maybe even the one you came here for, is short form clips. Here's what makes Riverside different from just recording and then exporting to edit somewhere else like Descript or Premiere Pro. Basically, the moment that you finish recording, it spits out 10 to 15 clips depending on, how long your session was. And this is called the Magic AI feature. So it pretty much scans the entire episode, hunts down the best moments so that you don't have to, unless you really decide that you want to. It gives you a very strong starting point where you can, without honestly having to tweak too much, find several clips that you are happy with on the first try. That rarely happens even when you're using, all these tools like Opus and other clip generators. Oftentimes I find they don't do a great job of finding the best moments like a human would. So I really appreciated that part about, Riverside's Magic AI feature. And you're not really locked into what it always select. So if you decide that you just want to use Riverside as an editor and choose the segments manually and, export it in different aspect ratios, you can certainly do that. Now, when it comes to the short form podcast clips, let me give you a few things that might help it perform a little bit better. So one of the things is certainly the title. That's one of the number one things that if you frame it with a title that doesn't really align with what the content is, it's just going to, set up for viewer dissatisfaction or people just bouncing off of the video. And so put time into basically watching the clip and then figuring out a title that just leads people seamlessly into that content. That's step one. The next step is going to be B-roll. So adding B-roll, you can spend honestly hours doing this if you really wanted to, but a way that you can kind of contain your effort is by focusing on just the first 5 to 10 seconds. So in the first 5 to 10 seconds, you can focus on putting as much B-roll there as you want. So people who do watch for a few seconds get the visual stimulation and experience, even if they bounce. But if not, they are hooked and it keeps them there till the end. So, if you can kind of in a 60-second clip, in the first 10 seconds, do a good job of hooking someone, you have the opportunity to let the rest of the clip breathe. Because in podcast clip formats, like what the speaker is saying is the main part. You don't need a bunch of visual distractions unless you are really catering to people like that, let's say on TikTok, right? Where it's very, maybe common for there to be lots of retention style edits. So one of the things I love is if you wanted to put in the time and effort with Riverside, you can actually do that. It's very easy because of text-based editing. So there are even presets, like you can choose the perfect color, the perfect font, the outro maybe that is pointing people to the full episode or your website or whatever. You can have that stuff selected once, and then it basically remembers that for all of the Magic AI clips that it will continue to generate. This is really huge because you'll often find something that's ready to roll. If let's say you don't want to add the extra B-roll up front, you want to just publish the clip as is. A lot of times, if you have a strong, the topic itself in the video is strong, that can carry more weight than B-roll might, right? So don't worry if you don't have the skill set to do some of that yet. Start by publishing clips that really resonate with you and that you can title really well and deliver on that title with the clip. Now, one of the things I love is once you've exported and downloaded the clip, you now have this asset that can be published in any short form platform, such as YouTube Shorts, because let's say you're publishing your full episode on YouTube already, that would be a perfectly sound place to start. If you wanted, you're using Instagram, maybe it's Instagram Reels, or you're a TikTok person, so you're going to publish on TikTok or LinkedIn. You have an opportunity, even in the future, if there's new platforms we don't even know yet that prioritize short form vertical video, you now have a backlog of stuff that you can save and publish, on a new platform. So basically the theme across all of this is to make decisions once and then automate the repetition. Now, the second strategy is one of the most underrated ones on the list. And I say this because almost nobody does it. If your episode is video and you are recording for, let's say, 25, 30 minutes or even longer, there are several segments that are buried inside of that episode. And so if you think about the full episodes across all of your favorite podcasts, there are many that I'm a big fan of that I've never consumed the full thing, but I will always consume the 10 or 15 minute segment that is published as a long form clip. Usually, why is that? It's because the title is usually better, right? It's not just maybe the name of the guest and something broad to capture an hour or 30 minutes worth of content. It's more focused. It's more focused on the 10 or 15 minutes or the 5 minutes. And so therefore you have the same content that may not actually even be listened to or watched by a lot of people who are discovering the full episode. Let's say they don't make it to that timestamp where you're talking about the really awesome 10-minute, clip. You now have an opportunity to give that episode new life by just publishing it as, and making sure that you title it really, really well, of course. But you can easily increase your upload rate, because of course YouTube will favor more uploads in the beginning. It gets more data on who you're trying to actually speak to. So more opportunities for your stuff to reach your ideal listener and viewer. So I would really go back to previous episodes that you've done and don't be afraid to publish these long form clips on a different week that is not of that episode. I find that a lot of people, after the week of the episode or the 2 weeks are done, they just completely stop referencing the shorts and the long clips and anything that could be made from that episode because you're so focused on the current week. So make sure to go back into the archives and find those really, really great timestamps and segments. And then as a practice for everything you record going forward, use the Riverside segments feature to be able to grab those very quickly, because here you often don't even need any B-roll because it often is kind of like it feels a little off, right? You're focused on what the people are saying. It's obviously a podcast clip. And so you have more patience with the viewer than you would if they thought they were walking into, let's say, a vlog. Now, the next question is, where do you publish these long form segments? Now, the first place I would start is going to be YouTube, because again, we're trying to give YouTube more data. We're trying to really focus on this platform because it is so friendly to podcasters, right? So you can get an extra several uploads from just these long form segments. But the next place I would consider is, let's say, LinkedIn, or let's say Facebook, or let's say any other long form platform. You never know when TikTok or Instagram or any new platform comes out that is like, hey, you can upload long form video here now, right? Now, strategy number 3 is a newsletter or an email list. These are both basically the same thing. It has kind of evolved over time to where everybody just calls it a newsletter now, but the format of this newsletter really matters. And so there's 2 ways that you can kind of structure this to get people in. And the point of it is to have the contact info, the direct email address and name of your top fans, right? Versus if YouTube or, Apple or any platform just completely went down and collapsed and, or you got locked out of your account, you no longer have access to who these people are, especially even on YouTube, right? The subscriber is a number. You see sometimes the public subscribers, but not every person's name is visible. It's just a number that keeps going up. So having access to, hey, I saw you on YouTube and I like your stuff, and a pathway to that is what that newsletter is for people who want to engage deeper or just be informed, and be in the circle, right? They want to kind of be notified when new episodes drop. Now, one of the things I love is if you go with this format of just giving people a sneak peek, Riverside does a wonderful job of giving you timestamps and a description and things that you can pull so that there's not so much, creative thinking that is involved in being able to get this out week to week or however often you want to. Now, the next way that you can do this is basically turning the video or audio episode into a text-based, newsletter. So the way that I would recommend doing this is on Substack, because Substack is free to get started. And it is one of those places where you get a little bit of distribution just from being on the platform itself. And you also have a catalog that begins to build. The goal is that even if somebody doesn't want to listen to you or doesn't have the time to watch the video version, they have a very quick way to scan and get the top ideas from you. And email is kind of something we all have access to. We all check. We all are, habitually attached to it. And so it's the kind of thing that there's not, with Substack, people can, of course, read inside of Substack if they want, but it also sends a copy to people's inboxes. Now, the fourth strategy is text and graphic-based content. This is a very underrated strategy as well, because it takes a little bit more thinking. And so what you're going to start with is the transcript of the episode. And so you can kind of read through this and begin to copy the one or two sentences that really stand out to you and save them in a note or a document somewhere. Now, let's say, for example, that the segment that you just copied is not something that you could just publish. It doesn't make sense to publish on its own, right? So what you would do is go, okay, this seed of an idea, this is a core concept that was talked about in the episode. How do I, now that I've slept on it, now that it's been published, now that I'm looking at it with a fresh lens, what are my thoughts on this, right? And so you're using this one or two sentences from the transcript to basically update some of your thoughts on it or repeat some of the same thoughts, but packaging it in a way for, let's say, X or Threads or, Substack notes, or maybe even a story post, right? That's just text, but then using graphics to be able to also deliver that text is interesting. So if you look at somebody, like a James Clear, his entire Instagram is just graphics, right? And it's not like it's a different graphic every time. It's like the text is different. The structure of the graphic is the exact same. So you can develop your own version of that, your own template that is basically like, oh, this is a quote or segment from the pod. The reason that I love text and graphic-based content is because it's much cheaper to produce, right? You are able to use something like Canva. You're able to, operate it versus, only with Riverside now do people become more comfortable editing things themselves, right? Before you just had to have an editor. It was too complex to take something like this on yourself. And so take something that's interesting and turn it into a swipeable, scannable asset that can be published on Instagram or LinkedIn and, native to that actual platform. This strategy is especially useful if you have an audio only podcast, because you don't have that A-roll and speaker footage to work with for all of these video assets or strategies we talked about. So leaning heavy into the text and graphic based options are, something that I recommend for everyone, because there's the barrier to entry is not too crazy, and there's lots of room to kind of make it your own. And remember, something that we're trying to create here is the vibe of, I want more of this. The fifth strategy is one of the highest leverage promotion tools that you can deploy. It is very effective, but it takes a little bit of mental toughness, I think, to do, because a lot of us feel self-conscious about maybe, doing this, which is podcast guesting. And often this is because you're like, I don't know what I would talk about or what I would say, or it feels weird reaching out and asking someone to be on their show. Now, of course, you don't have to start by pitching yourself to big shows like The Diary of a CEO. That would be unrealistic, right? And of course, you'd get a little bit of anxiety kind of going out in front of the entire world like that. But one of the things that you want to start with is by betting on which shows and which creators you think are going to actually go somewhere over the next couple years. And one of the things this does is you get access early on before the doors kind of shut down and now everybody's asking and they just don't have the bandwidth to say yes. So you can kind of let's say you get onto a podcast that has a very small audience. At the time, you maybe get 5 or 10 new listeners, but 6 months or a year down the line, when that show really does great. Now you're probably wondering, how does the promotion actually cross over, right? So when you go on another podcast, one of the things that is very common is they will let you feature links, right? Like, this is my website, this is my Instagram or my podcast, this is my YouTube channel, this is my free sample or program or whatever I'm doing, right? You basically have this used to cost a lot of money to get people to feature a link in their stuff. And so they're going to be doing this on YouTube. They're going to be doing it on Apple, Spotify, and maybe even their website if they, multi-purpose their stuff there. So you have an opportunity to basically build credibility and build all of these pathways where people can discover you down the line. Focus on crafting a couple bullets that would basically give the host a sense of, this is what the episode would be about. And because you are somebody now who's a podcaster and who's going to be, doing this stuff, you'll have a good gut feeling for like, does this feel interesting to this person? This strategy is so effective that often people can get away with just doing this one and not even having their own podcast. So you can just be a guest that is known as a really good guest. You have great stories, you deliver great content. There's a lot of views and downloads when you come on over time, right? This basically is really effective because now all these other places are linking to you and your stuff. And guess what? You can probably make clips out of your appearances, or you can honestly, they'll make it for you. And then you get a chance to be like, hey, look, I was on this show. Everybody likes to be able to say that they were featured on this show, right? So there's all these built-in mechanisms of podcast guesting. And of course, the actual relationships that you'll build that compound in ways that we can't even predict, right? But start small here. If you are someone who is already getting invited, or you have some type of unfair advantage, you have credibility, like you're a doctor or a lawyer, or you work in insurance, or you're an accountant, like you have some type of specific knowledge that you can educate people around, like make sure to lean into that. Don't discount that. And I find I've worked with people who have literally millions of followers on Instagram, and even they can get a little self-conscious with the idea of this. So you're not alone, but it is welcomed, right? As a host, I of course don't want bad pitches. Especially when people do it on other people's behalf, like, oh, my client is, so great, and, they would love to be on your show. It's like, I like when people reach out directly and it's them. And when I have a really good pitch, you welcome that. You're happy that that came across your table. So there's no harm in doing this. The worst outcome often is just no response, right? So keep this strategy in the back of your mind, even if you don't implement it right away, because just the frame of how would you talk about your show if you were guesting on a podcast and they asked you, hey, you're the host of this, how did that show come about, right? You can prepare for these answers, right? And you can kind of build stories and, things that are really effective in communicating your message and pointing people back to your show, getting them interested in your stuff. So there you have it. 5 ways to use Riverside to actually promote your podcast in a way that doesn't eat up your entire week. If you want to try Riverside for free, the link is in the description below. Make sure to use my code Pod Mahal and you'll get 15% off any paid plan. I appreciate you watching, and if this was helpful, make sure to drop a comment. I would love to hear from you, but good luck with your show, and I'll see you on the next one.